And we're now joined by Mercedes Schlapp, senior advisor to the Trump campaign. She was previously an assistant to President Trump and also a senior advisor for strategic communications. I also just want to say to Mercedes, it's great to have Matt Schlapp on Monday. We had a great exchange. So let me just ask you, what are we going to hear from the president tonight?
Look, I think what we're going to see is a contrast between Joe Biden's message from last week about American darkness and the doom and gloom of America, and the president, what he sees, which is American greatness. And it's American greatness for all. I was listening in to Janet's interview, obviously very much skewed to the left on what her thoughts are in terms of her anti-Trump message, similar to what the Democrats did last week. And I will tell you, as a Latina, I have seen what the president has done for the Latino community. The president has worked endlessly to provide opportunities, including being a champion for school choice, something that Joe Biden does not agree with. He's on the side of the teachers' unions. He has ensured that we could bring jobs back to America from places like China that helped the Latino community. We also saw under President Trump the unemployment number for Latinos at a record low. So someone who understands how to rebuild a strong economy, because he's done it once before as President Trump. This is when we're looking at a Biden agenda, you're talking about the fact that it is about increased taxes, job killing regulations, and more of the Washington swamp ideology, where, as we know, Joe Biden for almost 40 years doesn't have a great record to show.
One of the fascinating things about this convention is that you had, Eric Trump talking policy. You've had Herschel Walker in there laying out various dimensions. You had lots of unusual moments where policy and policy choices set up aspiration. I mean, I'm just being candid. It was a surprise, a nice surprise. And even David Axelrod has said, the RNC is doing a pretty good job. And to be honest with you, with faint praise from David, but I mean, are you feeling as if you're hitting it out of the park this week in changing, particularly independent voters and where they sit in looking at the two candidates?
What I'm enjoying is watching several of these other outlets. I'm just going to mention C-SPAN being one, where the Democrat calls in and says, I've changed my mind. I'm going to vote for Donald Trump, because what we've been able to do is cut through the media red tape. This idea that the media has made the president into this awful human being. And what we've been able to show, and people like myself who've worked in the White House for President Trump, be able to show his real character. The fact that this man wakes up every morning and is fighting for the American people, and his policies and his results reflect that. And he's done this in only 3.5 years. He is not a Washingtonian in any way. He is not a politician. But the one thing that I will tell you, and just being in having that chance to work with the president, is that he listens. And he knows that how do we get to the point that we fix these problems that are in the United States, whether it be combat coronavirus, whether it be passing strong economic policies to benefit the American workers, opportunity zones to help distressed communities, criminal justice reform to ensure that we don't have mass incarceration of minorities, which we know Joe Biden supported the 1994 crime bill that led to mass incarcerations. So we have a strong record to run on, and it's why you see more and more enthusiasm for this president, not just amongst Republicans. I mean, we are breaking through with independents, and in states like Pennsylvania, where we saw the crossover of these Democrats in 2016 to support the president, I think you're going to see it again in 2020.
Mercedes, this is all going on tonight. The president's speech is going on tonight when there are at least 3, and now there's really 4 when you look at the hurricane that's hitting, storms hitting the nation, right? You have racial strife and protests in the country over George Floyd, Jacob Blake, others. You have 50 some odd million people who've applied for unemployment insurance. And of course, you have a pandemic. There have been some speakers at the RNC who have talked about COVID-19 in the past tense, when it's still very much current tense. But what are you trying to do in terms of sending your message forward, but also addressing the reality that lots of America is under severe stress at the moment?
Oh, absolutely. I think we are all impacted by coronavirus. I mean, when I see these single parents who have to, or even, families who have to figure out How am I going to go back to work and also help my child through virtual learning? It's why the president has talked about the importance of reopening our schools safely. It's also about reopening the economy safely to get people back to work, because we've seen the mental health stress on so many Americans across the board. And that's why the president, while Congress got stuck and the Democrats couldn't finish through in terms of this second economic stimulus package, it's why the president used executive power, executive orders, to ensure that we would have additional unemployment assistance happening, to ensure that we're able to defer the payroll tax. So taking significant steps to provide immediate relief for families. Obviously, we've had the Paycheck Protection Program, which we know has saved about 50 million jobs in America. And I've been traveling across the country, meeting with these small business owners that have said, thank God for President Trump for getting through this Paycheck Protection Program, because I've been able to stay open. So, look, there is no question our country is going through a very stressful time. But we know that if we come together, unify, stand behind President Trump, he is the one leader who is able to combat the coronavirus. I mean, we don't have a Joe Biden coronavirus plan. All he does is attack the president. But what we know with the president is that he continuously ensures that our state and local officials have and governments have the resources they need to deal with any other spikes in their areas, that we are over 70 million tests that Americans have been able to that have taken tests. I mean, we have seen huge strides made here. In fact, with Operation Warp Speed, you're talking about that vaccine development is a priority. It's why we have 6 different clinical trials. It's why the president has made these investments with pharmaceutical companies, and we're making progress. We have been hard hit as a nation, but we know with President Trump's leadership, he is aggressive and bold and focused on ensuring that we can get a vaccine as quickly and safely as we can, as well as ensure that we have the therapeutics that we need to help those that have been inflicted with coronavirus.
And I agree, that's so important. We talk a lot here about vaccines, the development, therapeutics, distribution. Very happy you raised that. If we rewound a week ago and went to what we were talking about with many Democrats at the convention last week, the popping controversy then was the U.S. Postal Service and to some degree President Trump's own remarks about what more resources would create. Are we going to see a point where that's sort of reconciled and the president, in ads, on getting out the vote, are we going to see the Republican Party that he leads lean in on encouraging people to vote by whatever means they may?
Well, let's remember that it's the Democrats who want to sow chaos and confusion in our voting process. It's not fair at this point to fundamentally change our voting system 80, 70 days out before an election. That creates a huge problem. We're seeing the case of Nevada, for example, where you've sent out, they focus on universal mail-in voting. They haven't done it before. So they're sending out all these ballots, and they're finding that a good chunk of these ballots, live ballots, are coming back because they don't have the right address or they're unidentifiable. So it becomes a big issue. People move, people pass away. And remember, when these live ballots are being sent, they use the election file, which is out of date. So you're sending all these live ballots without any sense of verification. That could lead to voter fraud. That could create chaos in our system. We saw this clearly in the case of the New York Congressional District, where it was only 40,000 votes that needed to be counted, and it took them 6 weeks to count those 40,000 votes because they moved towards a mail-in ballot approach. Here's the deal. We want a safe election. We want to make sure Americans have options to vote. There are certain states that do this really well, Florida being one of them. They have an absentee ballot process where you could have signature verification, address verification. There's security measures in place to make sure we have voter integrity. It's a system that's been in place for a very long time. However, when these Democrats in the last minute are changing voter systems right, 60, 70, 80 days beforehand, it creates chaos in the system. It really opens us up to voter fraud. It opens us up to delays in figuring out the results. And that's what we want to avoid.
Well, Mercedes Slapp, Senior Advisor to President Trump, we really look forward and very excited to hear what the president lays out tonight. Thank you so much for spending time with us today.
Thank you so much. It will be a great night.
Great. See you soon.